When the country's largest bank faced total collapse, executives panicked. Then a young black girl, daughter of their cleaning woman, sat at the computer. What she did next saved 50 million accounts and exposed a secret nobody saw coming. Like, comment, and subscribe, so we can keep sharing stories like this. The emergency alarm screamed through the 47th floor of Sterling National Bank like the death rattle of an empire. Marcus Brennan, CEO of the country's largest financial institution, stood frozen before the massive display screens that covered the entire wall of the Crisis Management Center. Each screen showed the same terrifying reality. 50 million customer accounts disappearing into digital oblivion. Billions of dollars evaporating with every passing second. How long until total system failure? Marcus demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. At 53 years old, he had built his reputation on ruthless efficiency and absolute control. The panic flickering in his eyes now was something his employees had never witnessed before. 17 minutes, sir, stammered Gregory Walsh, the chief technology officer, his hands shaking as he scrolled through cascading error messages that made no sense. The breach is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not just stealing data, it's systematically erasing our entire infrastructure. Around the massive conference table, 15 of the bank's top executives sat in various stages of shock and denial. These were the minds that controlled 30% of the nation's financial assets. The people who moved markets with a single decision. Now they watched helplessly as their empire crumbled in real time. "Where are the backup systems?" barked Patricia Vance, chief operating officer, her perfectly styled hair beginning to show signs of the stress that was consuming them all. "Compromised. All of them," Gregory replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whoever did this knew exactly where every failsafe was located. It's as if they had our entire security architecture memorized." "That's impossible!" Marcus slammed his fist on the table, making everyone jump. "We spent $200 million on cybersecurity this year alone. We have the best protection money can buy." "Apparently not good enough," muttered Leonard Chen, the chief financial officer, staring at his tablet where market alerts were already beginning to flash. "The trading algorithms are detecting unusual activity. If this becomes public before we contain it, the market crash will make previous crises look like minor corrections." Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead, despite the aggressive air conditioning. Sterling National Bank wasn't just any financial institution. It was the backbone of the entire national economy. Over 300 million people depended on the stability of this bank for their mortgages, savings, retirement accounts, and daily transactions. If they failed, the domino effect would devastate the country's entire financial system. "Get me the cyber response team. Get me the Federal Reserve. Get me anyone who can stop this," Marcus shouted, though even he could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. At that moment, the door to the crisis center opened quietly. Rosa Martinez entered with her cleaning cart, just as she had done every evening for the past 16 years. She was a woman in her 40s who had become so invisible to the executives that they often discussed confidential matters while she cleaned around them, as if she were simply part of the furniture. "Not now," Patricia snapped without even looking up. "Can't you see we're in the middle of something critical?" Rosa froze, her hands gripping the cart handle. "I apologize, ma'am. I was just—" "Get out," Marcus thundered, his patience completely gone. "We're trying to prevent a national catastrophe and you're worried about emptying trash cans." Rosa nodded quickly, beginning to back out of the room. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood her daughter, Amara Martinez, a 14-year-old girl with intelligent eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. She had come to the bank after school because Rosa's usual babysitter was sick, and she had nowhere else to go. "You too, kid," Gregory waved dismissively. "This is a restricted area. You can't be here." Amara's gaze had fixed on the screens displaying the cascade of system failures. Her eyes moved rapidly across the lines of error codes, recognizing patterns that the expensive consultants and PhD-holding engineers apparently couldn't see. "Mom," Amara said quietly, "that's a recursive degradation attack with a polymorphic payload." The room went completely silent. All 15 executives turned to stare at this young black girl in a school uniform who had just used technical terminology that most of them didn't understand. "What did you just say?" Gregory asked, his tone mixing disbelief with irritation. Amara pointed at the main screen. "The attack pattern. It's not trying to steal your data. It's creating an infinite loop in your validation protocols. Every time your system tries to verify account integrity, it spawns another verification request, which spawns another, exponentially. That's why your backups failed. They were trying to validate against a moving target. Marcus felt his face reddening. Listen, little girl. I don't know where you learned those fancy words, but this is a crisis being handled by experts with decades of experience. Why don't you go play on your phone or something? I don't have a phone, Amara responded calmly, her eyes never leaving the screens. But I do know that if you don't interrupt the validation cascade in the next 15 minutes, your core banking system will corrupt itself beyond recovery. This is absurd! Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Marcus, are we really going to waste precious seconds listening to a child? Probably just repeated something she heard on a television show. But something in Amara's expression had caught the attention of Dr. Jennifer Park, the bank's chief data scientist, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room. Jennifer was the only executive who had earned her position through pure technical merit rather than corporate politics, and she recognized the look in Amara's eyes, the look of someone who genuinely understood what they were seeing. Wait, Jennifer said, standing up. Let her finish. Jennifer, you cannot be serious, Marcus protested. She just described a type of attack that was theoretical until about 6 months ago, Jennifer said, walking toward Amara. I've read exactly 3 academic papers on recursive degradation attacks, and they were all published in journals that require advanced degrees in computational theory to even access. How do you know about this? Amara glanced at her mother, who looked terrified that her daughter was speaking up at all. Rosa had spent 16 years teaching Amara to be invisible in places like this, to never draw attention, to never challenge people with power. But Amara had also inherited something else from her mother, an unshakable sense of integrity that made staying silent impossible when she knew she could help. I read those papers, Amara said simply. The university library downtown has public computer terminals. I go there after school while my mom works. They have access to academic databases. You read advanced cybersecurity research papers, Marcus said slowly, his tone dripping with sarcasm, at the public library, while your mother cleans toilets. The cruelty of the statement hung in the air like poison. Rosa's face flushed with shame, not for herself, but for the humiliation her daughter was experiencing. Yes, Amara replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to form. I also learned programming from online courses, network architecture from video tutorials, and quantum encryption theory from a professor who uploads lectures for free. Knowledge doesn't require money, sir. It just requires curiosity and time. How sweet, Patricia interjected with fake sympathy. But we have real problems being handled by real professionals. Gregory, how much time do we have left? 12 minutes, Gregory said, his voice tight with stress. And we're no closer to a solution. Marcus turned his back on Amara, effectively dismissing her. Call the emergency contractors. Get every cybersecurity firm on the East Coast on video conference. Offer them whatever they want. They'll never mobilize in 12 minutes, Jennifer said quietly. Then what do you suggest? Marcus spun around, his composure finally cracking. That we let this teenager play with a $2 trillion banking infrastructure? Jennifer looked at Amara, really looked at her, and saw something these other executives were too blinded by prejudice to recognize. She saw a mind that had absorbed knowledge not for grades or credentials or career advancement, but for the pure love of understanding. She saw someone who had been underestimated her entire life and had channeled that pain into becoming exceptional. I suggest we let her try, Jennifer said, her voice firm, because in 12 minutes, we'll have nothing left to lose anyway. The room erupted in protests, but Amara was already moving toward the terminal, her hands hovering over the keyboard with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours mastering this exact skill. She looked back at her mother one more time, seeking permission that Rosa gave with a small, terrified nod. Marcus opened his mouth to stop her, but something made him pause. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the absolute certainty in this child's eyes. Or maybe deep down, he recognized that his pride was about to cost millions of people everything they had. If you're wrong, Marcus said coldly, your mother will never work in this building again. Are you sure you want to risk that? Amara's fingers touched the keyboard, and her voice, when she spoke, carried a strength that didn't match her age. If I'm wrong, this bank collapses anyway and nobody has a job, so what exactly do we have to lose? She didn't wait for an answer. Her hands began flying across the keyboard, typing commands that made Gregory's eyes widen in recognition and shock, because what this 14-year-old was doing shouldn't have been possible, not just because of her age, but because she was executing solutions that their entire technical team hadn't even considered. The clock showed 10 minutes remaining, and Amara Martinez, daughter of a cleaning woman, had just begun the most important work of her life. Amara's fingers moved across the keyboard with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for someone her age. Lines of code appeared on the screen faster than most of the executives could read them, each command executed with the confidence of a master surgeon performing a delicate operation. "What is she doing?" Patricia whispered to Gregory, who was leaning forward in his chair, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like amazement. She's bypassing the validation cascade by creating a temporary sandbox environment," Gregory said slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. "She's isolating the infected protocols without triggering the recursive loop. That's actually genius." Marcus stood behind Amara, his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. "How much time left?" 8 minutes, Leonard announced, his eyes fixed on the countdown timer that represented the point of no return. Rosa remained frozen near the door, her cleaning cart abandoned, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. She had spent 14 years raising this extraordinary child alone, working 3 jobs at times to keep them fed and housed. Every night when Amara told her about the things she was learning at the library, Rosa had listened with pride mixed with fear. Pride at her daughter's brilliance, fear that the world would never give a girl like Amara a real chance to use it. Now that chance had arrived in the most terrifying way imaginable. "Talk us through what you're doing," Jennifer said, pulling up a chair beside Amara. Unlike the others, she wasn't watching Amara work with suspicion, but with genuine professional interest. "The attack inserted itself into the core validation framework," Amara explained without slowing her typing. "Every time the system tries to verify an account, it creates a phantom verification request. Those phantoms create more phantoms, exponentially. Within minutes, you have millions of fake processes consuming all your computing resources." "We know that," Marcus said impatiently. "What we don't know is how to stop it." "You can't stop it directly," Amara continued, her eyes scanning multiple screens simultaneously. "If you try to kill the processes, the attack interprets that as a validation attempt and spawns even more. It's designed to defend itself, using your own security protocols against you." "Then how?" Patricia began. "You don't fight it. You starve it," Amara interrupted, her fingers flying even faster. "I'm creating an isolated environment that mirrors your banking infrastructure but isn't connected to it. The attack will detect what it thinks is a vulnerable parallel system and migrate there, thinking it's spreading. Once it's fully transferred, I'll seal the sandbox and your real system will be clean." The room went silent as the implications of her strategy sank in. It was elegantly simple in concept, but extraordinarily complex in execution. The kind of solution that would have taken their entire technical team days to develop and implement. This 14-year-old was doing it in real time under pressure that would have broken most seasoned professionals. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Jennifer asked, genuine awe in her voice. Amara's hands paused for just a fraction of a second, and when she spoke, there was an edge of pain beneath her clinical tone. "When you spend your whole life being told you don't belong in spaces like this, you learn to see problems differently. You learn to find solutions that don't require resources you don't have. You learn to be creative because no one's going to hand you the conventional answers." Rosa felt tears forming in her eyes. She thought about all the times Amara had come home from school describing how teachers had assumed she needed remedial help because of how she looked, how counselors had steered her toward more realistic career paths, how other students' parents had questioned whether she really wrote her own papers. Every slight, every dismissal, every assumption of inadequacy had forged her daughter into someone who refused to accept limitations others tried to impose. 6 minutes, Gregory announced, his voice tight with tension. The screens showed the attack beginning to respond to Amara's strategy. The cascade of errors started redirecting, flowing toward the sandbox environment she had created. But something was wrong. The transfer rate was too slow. "It's not taking the bait fast enough," Amara muttered, her earlier confidence flickering for the first time. "The attack algorithm is more sophisticated than I thought. It's testing the sandbox, looking for traps." "So your plan isn't working," Marcus said, and there was cruel satisfaction in his voice, as if he'd been proven right about not trusting a child with their crisis. "I didn't say that," Amara shot back, her fingers adjusting her approach in real time. "I said it's being cautious, which means whoever designed this attack is watching right now, making decisions. This isn't just automated. There's a human intelligence guiding it." That revelation sent a chill through the room. A random cyber attack was one thing. An attack being actively controlled by someone who could adapt to their countermeasures was infinitely more dangerous. "Can you still beat it?" Jennifer asked. Amara didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved across the screens, watching patterns emerge and dissolve, seeing connections and vulnerabilities that existed in dimensions most people couldn't perceive. This was where her countless hours in the library had taken her beyond mere technical knowledge into something approaching art, the ability to think like both the system and the attacker simultaneously. "Yes," she said finally, "but I need to make it think it's winning." She began typing again, but this time her commands were different. Instead of trying to lure the attack into the sandbox, she started deliberately weakening the defenses of her trap, making it look like a system that was failing, vulnerable, irresistible. "What are you doing?" Gregory gasped. "Those commands are—" "Making the sandbox look like it's collapsing under the attack's weight," Amara explained. "Whoever's controlling this wants to see Sterling National Bank fail. They want to watch it burn. So I'm going to give them exactly what they want to see." 4 minutes, Leonard's voice cracked slightly. The attack took the bait. Like a predator that had spotted wounded prey, it surged toward the sandbox environment with renewed aggression. Error messages multiplied across the screens as Amara's trap appeared to buckle and fail. Several executives gasped, thinking they were watching their bank's final moments, but Amara's face remained calm, her eyes tracking something only she could see. "Come on," she whispered. "Just a little more. Commit to it." Rosa watched her daughter with a mixture of terror and overwhelming pride. She thought about the nights when Amara had stayed up until midnight reading textbooks she'd checked out from the library, teaching herself subjects that most adults found incomprehensible. She thought about the weekends when other kids were playing while Amara was taking online courses in programming languages with names Rosa couldn't pronounce. She thought about every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, every question of whether all this learning would ever lead anywhere. This was where it had led. To this moment. To this impossible test. 3 minutes, Gregory said, but his voice had changed. He was watching Amara's screens with the understanding of someone who had finally recognized what was happening. She's not losing, she's conducting. He was right. Amara wasn't just responding to the attack anymore. She was orchestrating it, guiding it exactly where she wanted it to go with the precision of a master strategist. Every apparent weakness she exposed was actually a carefully designed pathway. Every seeming failure was actually bait drawing the attack deeper into her trap. "Now," Amara said, and her fingers executed a series of commands so fast they were almost a blur. The screens erupted with activity. The sandbox environment, which had appeared to be collapsing, suddenly sealed itself with cryptographic locks that would have taken supercomputers years to break. The attack, fully committed to what it thought was a vulnerable target, found itself trapped in a digital prison of Amara's design, completely isolated from Sterling National Bank's real infrastructure. For 5 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the error messages stopped. The cascading failures halted. The account systems began stabilizing, verification processes returned to normal, and the existential threat that had been 17 minutes away from destroying the country's largest bank simply disappeared. "System integrity restored," Gregory whispered, staring at his monitors in disbelief. "Core banking functions operational, backup systems reconnecting. She actually did it." The silence that followed was profound. 15 of the most powerful people in finance sat frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A 14-year-old black girl, daughter of their cleaning woman, had just accomplished what their $200 million security infrastructure and team of expert consultants could not. Marcus slowly walked around to face Amara, who remained seated at the terminal, her hands finally still, exhaustion visible in every line of her young face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What do you say to someone who just saved your entire world while you were busy dismissing them as worthless? How long have you been studying cybersecurity? Jennifer asked, her voice filled with respect. Since I was 9, Amara replied quietly. The library downtown started offering free computer classes. I took one and realized I was good at it, so I kept learning. Every day after school, every weekend. Sometimes the librarians let me stay until closing. And your school? Patricia asked. They must have recognized your abilities. Amara's laugh was bitter. My school put me in the average track. They said advanced placement classes were for students with demonstrated potential. When I tried to show them what I could do, they said I must have had help. They couldn't believe someone like me could be genuinely gifted. The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy fog. These executives had spent their careers in a world where talent was assumed to correlate with privilege, where brilliance was expected to come with the right background, the right connections, the right appearance. Amara had just shattered every one of those assumptions. Miss Martinez, Marcus began, and for the first time that evening, he was using her actual name. He stopped, unable to finish, because what was there to say? That he was sorry for humiliating her? That he was grateful she had saved them despite his cruelty? That he was ashamed of every assumption he'd made? Before anyone could speak again, one of the screens flickered. A message appeared, written in the same code the attack had used. Impressive, but this was just the test. The real attack begins tomorrow. Ghost. The room erupted in panic, but Amara was already studying the message, her brilliant mind analyzing every character, every pattern, every microscopic clue embedded in how it was written. Whoever this is, she said slowly, they're not done with Sterling National Bank. Tonight was just them probing your defenses, and now they know exactly how good those defenses really are. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Can you stop them again? Amara turned to look at him, and in her eyes was a question that hung unspoken in the air. After how you've treated me and my mother, why should I? But what she actually said was simpler and somehow more devastating. I don't know. But I'm going to need access to your entire system architecture, complete security protocols, and every detail about how this bank operates. And I'm going to need it tonight. She glanced at her mother, still standing by the door with her abandoned cleaning cart, then back at Marcus. The question is, are you willing to trust the cleaning woman's daughter with the keys to your kingdom? The answer to that question would determine not just the fate of Sterling National Bank, but the fate of millions of people whose lives depended on it. The clock on the wall read past midnight when Marcus finally broke the suffocating silence that had filled the crisis center. Around him, executives remained frozen in their chairs, still processing the impossible reality that their empire had been saved by someone they had dismissed as irrelevant only hours earlier. Everyone out, Marcus said quietly, except Jennifer, Gregory, and, when he paused, the words physically painful to form, Rosa and Amara Martinez. Patricia opened her mouth to protest, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. The other executives filed out slowly, casting backward glances at the young girl who had rewritten everything they thought they knew about talent and worth. When the door closed, Rosa finally moved from her position by the wall. She walked to her daughter, placing trembling hands on Amara's shoulders. Mija, are you okay? Amara nodded, but Jennifer, who had been studying her closely, saw what Rosa saw. The slight tremor in Amara's hands, the exhaustion in her eyes that went beyond physical tiredness. This child had just carried the weight of an entire nation's financial system on her shoulders while being treated like she was worthless. The psychological toll of that was only beginning to show. Miss Martinez, Marcus began, then stopped. Both of you. I need to apologize. No, Rosa interrupted, and the firmness in her voice startled everyone. For 16 years, she had been the invisible woman who cleaned their offices, who accepted every dismissal and humiliation with silent dignity. But watching her daughter be treated the same way had awakened something fierce inside her. You don't get to apologize yet. You don't get to feel better about yourself until you understand what you almost threw away. Marcus blinked, shocked to be challenged by someone he had barely registered as human until tonight. Do you want to know where my daughter learned to do what she did tonight? Rosa continued, her voice shaking with emotion she had suppressed for years. She learned it in stolen moments between my shifts. She learned it in a public library because we couldn't afford internet at home. She learned it by teaching herself from free resources because her school told her she wasn't smart enough for advanced classes. Rosa walked to the windows overlooking the city, her reflection ghostly in the glass. When Amara was 7 years old, her teacher called me in for a conference. She said Amara was disruptive, that she kept correcting the computer teacher, that she needed to learn her place. Her place. Do you know what that means when they say it to a black girl from the poor side of town? The room was absolutely silent. It means stay invisible. It means don't challenge. It means accept that people like us exist to serve people like you, and we should be grateful for the opportunity. Rosa turned back to face Marcus, tears streaming down her face. So I worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I cleaned offices while businessmen discussed deals worth millions, invisible as furniture. And every night I came home to find my baby girl teaching herself things I couldn't understand, reaching for dreams that terrified me because I knew how hard the world would work to crush them. Amara stood and went to her mother, wrapping her arms around her. "Mama, it's okay." "No, it's not okay," Rosa said fiercely, holding her daughter tight. "It's not okay that you had to prove yourself 10 times over just to get a chance. It's not okay that these people almost let millions suffer because they couldn't see past their prejudices. It's not okay that you're 14 years old and you've already had to be stronger than most adults will ever need to be." Marcus felt something cracking inside his chest, an armor of arrogance and entitlement that had protected him from feeling genuine empathy for decades. He thought about his own children, who had attended elite private schools, who had tutors and opportunities handed to them without question, who had never once been told they didn't belong in advanced classes or couldn't achieve their dreams. "How old were you?" Jennifer asked Amara softly. "When you first realized you were good with computers?" Amara pulled back from her mother, wiping her eyes. 5. We had a computer at the community center that kept crashing. I watched the tech support guy fix it once, and I understood what he was doing. The next time it crashed, I fixed it myself. The center director thought one of the adults had done it. When I told her it was me, she didn't believe me until I showed her. "And school?" Gregory asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier dismissiveness. "School was hard," Amara said, and the understatement carried years of pain. Teachers would see my test scores and assume I cheated. When I tried to join the coding club, they said it was full, but it wasn't. When I applied for the gifted program, they said I didn't have the right profile. I learned to stop raising my hand, to stop asking questions, to make myself small so I wouldn't be a problem. "But you didn't stop learning," Jennifer observed. "No," Amara smiled sadly. "I just learned to do it where no one could see. The library became my real school." Mrs. Chen, the head librarian, noticed I was reading advanced programming books. She started saving new arrivals for me, getting me access to online courses, connecting me with professors who did open office hours over video. She saw me. For the first time since I was little, someone in an educational space actually saw me. Marcus walked to the window, his back to the room, processing emotions he had spent decades avoiding. "Why didn't you give up?" "Most people would have." "Because my mother never gave up on me," Amara said simply. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she would ask me what I learned that day. She couldn't understand the technical parts, but she understood that I needed someone to believe I was worth teaching. She worked herself to exhaustion so I could have that. Rosa's voice was thick with emotion. Her father left when she was 2, said he didn't sign up to raise a kid alone, that it was too hard. For years I was so angry. But then I realized he gave me the greatest gift. He left me with this brilliant, beautiful soul, and I got to watch her grow into someone extraordinary. "The university library you mentioned," Gregory said, his technical mind catching a detail. "How did you get access to academic journals? Those require institutional credentials." Amara glanced at her mother nervously. I may have found a workaround. There's a provision in the database systems that allows public library cards to access certain academic resources if they're requested for educational purposes. I wrote a script that automated those requests within legal parameters. It's technically allowed, just not commonly known. You hacked the system, Marcus said, but there was a note of something like respect in his voice. I used the system as designed, Amara corrected. I just used it better than most people think to. That's what good programming is. Finding elegant solutions within existing frameworks. Jennifer laughed, a sound of genuine delight. Do you realize what you just described? That's exactly how you beat the attack tonight. You used Sterling's own security architecture against itself in ways the designers never anticipated. That's because I think differently, Amara said. When you've spent your life being locked out of systems, you get really good at finding the doors no one else sees. Not by breaking them, by understanding them better than the people who built them. Marcus turned back to face the room, and his expression had changed. The arrogance was still there. That wasn't something that disappeared in one night, but it had been joined by something else. Recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of shame. Ghost's message said the real attack comes tomorrow, he said, forcing himself back to the practical crisis. If tonight was just a test, what are we actually facing? Amara moved back to the terminal, pulling up the message that had appeared after she'd neutralized the attack. Her fingers traced patterns on the screen as she analyzed it. This message wasn't just a taunt. It's a signature. Look at how it's coded. There are redundancies built into the syntax that serve no functional purpose. That means whoever wrote this wanted us to be able to analyze it. Why would an attacker give us clues? Gregory asked. Because they're confident we can't stop them even if we know they're coming, Amara said, a chill in her voice. Or because they want us to know who they are and why they're doing this. This isn't just about money or data theft. This is personal. Personal? Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean? Amara pulled up a secondary screen, running diagnostics on the attack code's origin. The recursive degradation method used tonight? I told you it was theoretical until recently. It was developed by a researcher named Dr. Sebastian Kane. He published a paper about it 7 months ago. Gregory went pale. Sebastian Kane. He used to work here. The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Marcus sank into a chair. The fraud case. 6 years ago. What fraud case? Rosa asked. Jennifer explained, her voice heavy with regret she hadn't felt until this moment. Sebastian Kane was our head of cybersecurity. Brilliant programmer, innovative thinker. He developed most of our current security infrastructure, but then an internal audit discovered he had been embezzling funds. Small amounts, but consistently over several years. Millions total. We prosecuted him, Marcus continued. He claimed he was innocent, that someone had framed him, but the evidence was overwhelming. He went to prison for 5 years, got out 4 months ago, and now he's coming for revenge, Gregory whispered. Not just revenge, Amara said, her eyes scanning deeper into the code. Look at the target list embedded in the attack architecture. He's not just going after Sterling National Bank. He's going after every financial institution in the country. Tonight was testing our defenses because we're the biggest. Once he cracks us, he'll use what he learned to take down the entire system. The implications were staggering. Tonight had been about 50 million accounts. What Amara was describing would affect hundreds of millions of people, potentially collapsing the entire national economy. Can we call the authorities? Rosa asked. The FBI, someone. And tell them what? Marcus said bitterly. That our security was beaten by our own former employee, and the only person who could stop him is a 14-year-old who we've been treating like she's worthless? Do you know how that makes us look? It makes you look honest, Amara said quietly. It makes you look like people who were wrong and are willing to admit it to save others. Isn't that what leaders are supposed to do? The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Marcus had built his entire career on the image of infallibility, on never admitting weakness, on maintaining the appearance of absolute control. Everything Amara represented challenged that model completely. If we bring in federal authorities, this becomes public. Patricia's voice came from the doorway. She had apparently been listening outside. Our stock price will collapse. Consumer confidence will evaporate. Other banks will see us as vulnerable. It could trigger the very crisis we're trying to prevent. So what's your solution? Jennifer challenged. Pretend it's not happening? My solution, Patricia said coldly, looking directly at Amara, is that we contain this internally. We pay our consultants whatever it takes to fix the problem. We don't stake the bank's reputation on a child who shouldn't even be in this building. Rosa stepped forward, her years of invisible service finally erupting into visible fury. You're right. My daughter shouldn't be in this building. She should be in a school that recognizes her genius. She should be in a university program that nurtures her talent. She should be anywhere but here, saving people who look at her and see nothing. Then take her and leave, Patricia said. We'll handle this ourselves. No, you won't, Amara said, her voice cutting through the tension. Because you can't. Dr. Kane is 3 steps ahead of you. He knows your systems because he built them. He knows your people because he trained them. He knows your weaknesses because he spent years learning them from the inside. She looked directly at Marcus. But he doesn't know me. He doesn't know I exist. And that's the only advantage you have. Marcus stared at this remarkable child, this girl who should have been crushing him with contempt, but instead was offering to save him again. Why? Why would you help us after everything? Amara glanced at her mother, then back at Marcus. Because this isn't about you. It's about the single mother with 3 kids who has her life savings in your bank. It's about the elderly couple trusting you with their retirement. It's about millions of regular people who did nothing wrong, but will lose everything if you fail. I'm not doing this for Sterling National Bank. I'm doing this for them. The shame Marcus felt deepened into something approaching transformation. This child understood responsibility and service in ways he had forgotten decades ago, if he'd ever known them at all. What do you need? He asked. And for the first time, there was no condescension in his voice, only respect. Amara moved to a whiteboard, uncapping a marker. First, I need complete access to every detail about Dr. Kane's time here. His projects, his relationships, anything that might tell us how he thinks. Second, I need your security team's full cooperation. No more questioning my age or my background. Third, she paused, looking at her mother with love and sadness. I need Mama to go home and rest. This is going to take all night and one of us should be able to function tomorrow. Absolutely not, Rosa said immediately. I'm not leaving you here alone. You won't be alone, Jennifer interjected. I'll stay with her. And I promise you, Mrs. Martinez, no one will disrespect your daughter while I'm here. You have my word. Rosa looked between her daughter and this executive who had been the only one to see Amara's worth from the beginning. Finally, reluctantly, she nodded. I'll be back at dawn, Rosa said, pulling Amara into a fierce hug. You call me if you need anything. Anything at all. As Rosa left, Amara watched her mother's retreating figure with eyes that held too much understanding for someone so young. She had just sent away the only person who had never doubted her, and now she stood in a building full of people who had spent the evening proving they saw her as less than human. But she straightened her shoulders, turned back to the whiteboard, and began mapping out the strategy that might save them all. Because that's what extraordinary people do. They save others even when those others don't deserve it. They rise above the cruelty and the dismissal and the humiliation, not because it's easy, but because it's right. And Amara Martinez was, in every way that mattered, extraordinary. The hours between midnight and dawn have a particular quality in corporate towers, a silence that feels both peaceful and unsettling, as if the building itself is holding its breath. Amara sat surrounded by monitors displaying years of Dr. Sebastian Kane's work at Sterling National Bank, searching for patterns that might reveal how to stop him. Jennifer worked at an adjacent terminal, pulling up personnel files and project documentation. Gregory had initially retreated to his own office, but returned after an hour, unable to sleep, knowing that the bank's survival depended on understanding a man he had once considered a friend. He was brilliant, Gregory said quietly, scrolling through code that Kane had written years earlier. The security architecture he designed was revolutionary. I used to joke that his programs were so elegant they looked like poetry. What was he like? Amara asked, her eyes never leaving her screen. As a person, I mean. Gregory considered the question carefully. Intense, passionate about his work, but also lonely, I think. He came from nothing, worked his way through community college while holding down 2 jobs. He understood what it meant to be underestimated because of where you started. The parallel wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Amara's fingers paused over her keyboard for just a moment. Did you believe he embezzled the money? Jennifer asked. The evidence was overwhelming, Gregory said. but there was uncertainty in his voice. Bank transfers, digital signatures, everything pointed to him. But there was always something that bothered me. Kane was meticulous about his work, obsessively careful. The idea that he would leave such an obvious trail didn't fit his personality. Amara pulled up the fraud investigation files, her analytical mind dissecting the evidence with fresh eyes. These transfers happened over 18 months. Small amounts, irregular intervals, designed to avoid automatic detection thresholds. Smart, but not brilliant. What do you mean? Marcus had entered quietly, carrying coffee for everyone. The gesture was small, but for someone who had spent his career having others serve him, it represented something significant. Dr. Kane was brilliant, right? Amara said, accepting the coffee with a nod of thanks. So if he was going to steal money, he would have done it in a way that was truly undetectable. This is too obvious for someone of his caliber, unless he wanted to get caught. Or unless someone else wanted him to get caught. The implication settled over the room like a cold fog. You're saying he was framed? Gregory whispered. I'm saying it's worth investigating, Amara replied, pulling up the digital forensic analysis from the original case. As she read through it, her expression grew increasingly troubled. Look at the authentication logs. Kane's credentials were used to authorize the transfers, but the IP addresses show access from multiple locations simultaneously. That's physically impossible unless someone cloned his credentials, Jennifer finished, leaning forward. But that would have required insider knowledge of our authentication systems. Knowledge that only a handful of people would have had 6 years ago, Marcus said slowly, his executive mind beginning to process implications he had been too arrogant to consider before. Amara navigated deeper into the archived security logs, following digital breadcrumbs that the original investigators had apparently missed or ignored. What she found made her blood run cold. There's a shadow pattern in the logs, she said, her voice tight. Every time Kane's credentials were used fraudulently, there was another user logged into administrative systems. User designation PA447. Who is that? Gregory pulled up the employee database, then went pale. That's Patricia Vance's designation, our chief operating officer. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt the floor tilting beneath him. Patricia had been his trusted second-in-command for over a decade. She had been instrumental in Kane's prosecution, had personally testified about the evidence against him. Why would Patricia frame Kane? Jennifer asked. But even as she spoke, pieces were clicking into place. Unless the money. Where did the embezzled funds allegedly go? Amara traced the transfers through layers of shell companies and cryptocurrency conversions. They went into offshore accounts that were supposedly Kane's. But look at what happened 2 years after his conviction. These accounts were liquidated and the funds moved again. The final destination is hidden behind military-grade encryption, but the timing matches exactly with when Patricia purchased her vacation property in the Caribbean. She framed him and stole the money herself, Marcus said, the betrayal cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. And we sent an innocent man to prison. Not just innocent, Amara said softly, pulling up Kane's case file. Look at what happened during his trial. His wife left him. His daughter stopped speaking to him. He lost his house, his reputation, 5 years of his life, and he knew he was innocent, but no one believed him. The weight of that injustice filled the room. Amara thought about all the times she had been disbelieved, dismissed, assumed to be less than she was. But she had never lost years of her life to prison, never had her entire world destroyed by someone else's lies. He's not just attacking the bank, she said, the full picture becoming clear. He's attacking the system that failed him. He's proving that the people who judged him are no better than the crime they accused him of. And Patricia, she's probably his real target. As if summoned by her name, the door burst open. Patricia stood there, her earlier composure completely shattered. We need to talk, now. I think we do, Marcus said, his voice cold with fury. How long did you think you could hide what you did? Patricia's face cycled through emotions. Confusion, fear, calculation, and finally resignation. I don't know what lies this child has been telling you, but User PA447, Amara said simply. 18 months of fraudulent transfers using Kane's credentials, but always while you were logged into administrative systems. Caribbean property purchased with liquidated offshore accounts. Should I continue? Patricia sagged against the doorframe. For a moment, She looked like she might deny everything, but then something broke inside her. You don't understand. I had debts. Gambling debts. The kind of people who don't accept excuses. I needed money fast, and Kane was perfect. Brilliant enough that people would believe he could pull it off. Isolated enough that no one would dig too deep to defend him. He went to prison for 5 years, Gregory said, his voice shaking with anger. His life was destroyed. I know, Patricia whispered, and there were tears on her face now. I've known every single day for 6 years. I tried to make it right. I tried to anonymously provide evidence for an appeal, but by then he'd stopped fighting. He accepted his guilt just to end the nightmare, and I couldn't live with it anymore. So, Ghost, Amara said slowly, understanding dawning. You've been communicating with Kane. You told him about our security weaknesses. Patricia nodded miserably. He contacted me 6 weeks ago, said he knew what I did, had proof, would destroy me unless I helped him. But it wasn't just about revenge. He said he wanted to expose the corruption in the entire banking system. He said institutions like Sterling National Bank destroy ordinary people, while executives like us get away with everything. And you believed that made it okay to potentially collapse the economy. Marcus was struggling to control his rage. No, Patricia said. But I thought if I helped him, he might show mercy, might expose just me instead of destroying everything. I was wrong. He's going to burn it all down, and me along with it. Amara stood, walking to the window where the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. She thought about Dr. Sebastian Kane, a brilliant man who had been betrayed by the very system he had helped protect. She thought about the anger he must feel, the desire for justice that had twisted into revenge. She understood it. God help her. She understood it. What time does the attack come? She asked quietly. 9 a.m., Patricia said. When the markets open, maximum impact, maximum chaos. He designed it to cascade through every major financial institution in the country within minutes. It'll make tonight's attack look like a practice drill. Can we stop him? Jennifer asked. Amara turned back to face the room. Technically, maybe. But that's not really the question, is it? What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, Dr. Kane isn't wrong about everything, Amara said, and the truth of her words hit like a physical blow. The system is corrupt. People like Patricia do get away with destroying lives. Institutions like this bank do let prejudice and privilege determine who gets opportunities and who gets crushed. He's not wrong. He's just chosen the wrong way to fix it. She looked at Marcus directly. You can't stop him with just better security. You need to give him a reason not to destroy everything. You need to show him that the system can actually deliver justice. You want me to turn Patricia in, Marcus said slowly. I want you to do what's right, Amara corrected. I want you to prove that powerful people can be held accountable for their crimes. I want you to show Dr. Kane that he doesn't need to burn the world down because someone is finally willing to admit the truth and face the consequences. Patricia went completely white. If I go to prison, you should have thought of that before you destroyed an innocent man's life, Gregory said harshly. But Amara was still looking at Marcus, waiting to see what kind of man he really was. This was the moment that would define everything that came after. He could protect his executive, maintain the illusion of institutional infallibility, keep the corruption hidden, or he could do something that terrified every powerful person, admit that they had been catastrophically wrong, and accept the consequences. The room held its breath. Call the federal prosecutor, Marcus said finally, each word clearly painful. Tell them everything. Patricia will surrender herself this morning, and we'll make a public statement acknowledging that Sebastian Kane was innocent, that he was wrongfully convicted, and that Sterling National Bank takes full responsibility. That will destroy our credibility, Patricia said desperately. The stock price will crash. Customers will lose faith. Other banks will sense weakness. Then they sense weakness, Marcus said, because the alternative is letting millions of innocent people suffer to protect our pride. And I've had enough of that particular kind of corruption. He turned to Amara, and she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Humility, respect, the beginning of redemption. You've taught me something tonight that I should have learned decades ago, he said quietly. That real strength isn't about never being wrong. It's about having the courage to admit when you are, and do whatever it takes to make it right. Amara felt something easing in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. The federal prosecutor won't be enough. You need to contact Dr. Kane directly. You need to tell him the truth yourself. Face whatever consequences come from that, and offer him something that matters more than revenge. What could possibly matter more than revenge to someone who lost everything? Jennifer asked. Amara smiled sadly, thinking about her own mother, about all the times they had been knocked down and had chosen to get back up anyway. The chance to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. The opportunity to turn his pain into protection for others who might suffer the same injustice. The possibility of redemption, not for himself, but for a system that failed him. She pulled up a secure communication channel. I can trace the ghost protocol he used. I can open a direct line to him. But Marcus, you need to understand. He's going to be angry. He's going to hate you, and you're going to have to take that, absorb it, and still find a way to reach whatever part of him still believes that justice is possible. Marcus straightened his shoulders, looking more uncertain than he had in decades. I don't know if I can do that. Then learn, Amara said simply, because I had to learn how to save people who treated me like garbage. You can learn how to face someone you wronged. As dawn broke over the city, Amara initiated the connection that would either save millions of lives or trigger the collapse of everything they had worked to protect. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. Dr. Sebastian Kane, 5 years older and infinitely harder than his personnel photos showed, staring out at them with eyes that held nothing but cold fury. So, Kane said, his voice like ice, Sterling National Bank finally figured out who's been knocking on their door, and they sent a child to face me. How pathetically appropriate. Dr. Kane, Amara began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My name is Amara Martinez, and I'm here to tell you that you were right about everything, and to ask you if destroying millions of innocent lives is really the justice you're looking for. Kane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or the recognition of another person who understood what it meant to be underestimated and betrayed. You have 3 hours, he said. Convince me. The screen went dark, and the real work began. 3 hours until market opening. 3 hours to convince a man who had lost everything that mercy was still possible. 3 hours to prevent the collapse of an entire economic system. Marcus sat across from Amara, his hands trembling slightly as he reviewed the notes Jennifer had compiled about Sebastian Kane's life before and after his conviction. Every page was a testament to systematic destruction. A marriage ended. A daughter who refused to speak to him. A career obliterated. A reputation shattered. And through it all, the desperate protests of innocence that no one had believed. I don't know how to do this, Marcus admitted, the words almost physically painful for someone who had spent decades projecting absolute confidence. I don't know how to face someone I helped destroy and ask for their forgiveness. You don't ask for forgiveness, Amara said quietly, her fingers preparing the secure video connection. You can't earn that in 3 hours. What you do is acknowledge the truth, accept responsibility, and offer him something real, something that matters. What could possibly matter to him now? Amara thought about her own mother, about the countless nights Rosa had come home exhausted from being invisible, from being dismissed, from being treated as less than human. The knowledge that his suffering meant something, that it exposed corruption that will now be punished, that other people won't go through what he did because someone finally had the courage to admit the truth. Gregory entered the room, his face drawn with exhaustion and guilt. The federal prosecutor is standing by. Patricia is already in custody. The board of directors is convening an emergency session. Marcus, they're calling for your resignation. Let them, Marcus said, surprising everyone, including himself. I'll resign the moment this crisis is resolved. But right now, stopping Kane is the only thing that matters. Jennifer pulled up footage from the prison where Kane had spent 5 years. Security camera images showed a man slowly breaking under the weight of injustice. The brilliant programmer reduced to a number, his protests of innocence dismissed as the lies of every criminal who claimed they were framed. There's something else you need to see, Jennifer said hesitantly. She pulled up visitation logs. Kane's daughter visited him once during his entire sentence, 3 months after his conviction. The visit lasted 8 minutes. She played the archived security footage. A teenage girl sat across from her father, her face a mask of hurt and betrayal. No sound, but the body language told the entire story. Kane reaching out, his daughter pulling back, standing up, walking away without looking back. Kane's devastation was visible even through the grainy video, his head dropping into his hands. "His daughter's name is Sarah," Gregory said softly. "She was 14 when he went to prison. Same age as Amara. She changed her last name, moved across the country with her mother, refused all contact. As far as she's concerned, her father died the day he was convicted." Amara felt something twisting in her chest. She thought about her own father, who had abandoned them, but at least she had never believed he was a good man who betrayed her. Kane's daughter had lost something worse, the father she trusted, or so she thought. "What happened to her?" Amara asked. Jennifer pulled up social media profiles. "She's 17 now, brilliant student, strong in mathematics and computer science, refuses to discuss her father, has built a wall around that part of her life. There are school counseling reports in Kane's legal files. Sarah struggled with trust issues, depression, anger. She blamed herself, thought she should have seen signs that her father was a criminal. She blamed herself for his guilt," Marcus said slowly, "when she should have been angry at us for his innocence." The weight of that realization settled over everyone. This wasn't just about Kane's lost years. It was about a child who had internalized her father's supposed criminality, who had carried that shame and guilt through her teenage years, who had lost her father twice, once to prison and once to her own mistaken belief in his corruption. "It's time," Amara said, initiating the connection. The screen flickered to life. Sebastian Kane appeared, but not from the sterile location they had seen earlier. He was in what looked like a small apartment, sparse and impersonal, the kind of place someone lives when they're not planning to stay long. Behind him, visible on a wall, was a photograph. Kane and a young girl, maybe 10 years old, both smiling at a science fair. His daughter, from the time before everything fell apart. 3 hours, Kane said without preamble. "You've had 3 hours. Why shouldn't I do exactly what I planned?" Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Amara placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. She leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "Because Sarah still loves you," Amara said softly. Kane's expression cracked for the first time, pain flashing across his face before he could control it. "You know nothing about my daughter." "I know she kept her mathematics textbooks from when you used to help her with homework," Amara said, pulling up information Jennifer had found. "I know she's studying computer science even though it reminds her of you. I know she follows cybersecurity news obsessively, and 3 months ago she read every article about a theoretical paper on recursive degradation attacks written by someone with your expertise. She was looking for you," Jennifer added, "in the only way she knew how, through the work." Kane's hands clenched on his desk. "She hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. She made it very clear she wanted nothing to do with a criminal father. She wanted nothing to do with a father she thought betrayed her," Marcus said, finding his voice. "But Dr. Kane, you never betrayed anyone. We betrayed you. I betrayed you. 3 years too late," Kane said bitterly. "Yes," Marcus agreed simply. 3 years too late. 5 years of your life that I can never give back. A relationship with your daughter that I helped destroy. A career, a reputation, a life. All of it gone because I was too arrogant to question the evidence, too confident in our systems to imagine they could be corrupted from within. You're admitting this now because you're desperate," Kane said. "Because I have you cornered. That's not justice. That's cowardice." "You're right," Marcus said, and the admission seemed to surprise Kane more than any defense would have. "You're absolutely right. If you hadn't forced this confrontation, I probably would have gone the rest of my life never knowing or caring about the innocent man we destroyed. That's the kind of person I've been." Kane studied Marcus's face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and shame. "So what? You admit you're terrible, and I'm supposed to forgive you? Let millions of people keep their money and security because you finally developed a conscience?" "No," Amara interjected. "You're supposed to decide what kind of person you want to be. The system failed you. The people who should have protected you betrayed you. You have every right to be angry, to want revenge. But Dr. Kane, you taught computer science at community college before you came to Sterling. Do you remember why?" Kane's expression flickered with something like surprise. "How do you know that?" "Because I read everything about you," Amara said. including the interview you gave to a local newspaper 11 years ago. You said you wanted to teach at community college specifically because that's where students like you went. People who couldn't afford fancy universities, who worked full-time while getting their degrees, who had to fight for every opportunity. You said the best thing an educator could do was see potential in students everyone else overlooked. She paused, letting that sink in. You were me, Dr. Kane. You were a brilliant person from a poor background who had to prove yourself 1,000 times over, who was underestimated and dismissed and told you didn't belong. And you survived all of that and became someone who helped other people like you, until the system crushed you for a crime you didn't commit. Kane's jaw tightened, emotions warring across his face. The attack you're planning, Amara continued, her voice gentle but firm. It won't just hurt Sterling National Bank or Marcus Brennan or the executives who failed you. It'll hurt the single mother with 3 kids who has her life savings in a checking account. It'll hurt the elderly couple trusting their retirement to investments they don't understand. It'll hurt people exactly like the students you used to teach, people who are just trying to survive in a system that's stacked against them. They should know the system is corrupt, Kane said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. They already know, Amara replied. Every poor person, every person of color, every person who's been marginalized, we already know the system is rigged. What we don't know is if anyone with power will ever actually admit it and do something about it. That's what you have the chance to show them now. Gregory leaned forward. Sebastian, I should have fought for you. When the evidence emerged, I should have questioned it more deeply. I knew you. I knew how meticulous you were, how careful. The sloppiness of the supposed embezzlement should have been a red flag. But I was comfortable, and questioning it would have been inconvenient, so I convinced myself the evidence must be real. I'm sorry. That apology is inadequate, but it's true. Kane looked at his former colleague, perhaps his former friend, and some of the rage drained from his expression, replaced by exhaustion. Do you know what prison does to someone who knows they're innocent? Every day, you wake up thinking, today someone will realize the mistake. And every day, no one does. Every appeal is denied. Every protest is dismissed. Eventually, you stop fighting because fighting hurts more than accepting it. His voice broke slightly. I stopped fighting for myself. But I couldn't stop Sarah from fighting with her own demons, from hating herself for having a criminal father. I couldn't protect her from that because I was locked away, helpless, watching my daughter destroy herself over lies. She doesn't have to destroy herself anymore, Jennifer said, pulling up current information. Dr. Kane, Patricia Vance has been arrested. She's confessed everything. The federal prosecutor has already filed paperwork to vacate your conviction. By this afternoon, your record will be cleared. Sterling National Bank is preparing a public statement acknowledging your innocence and taking full responsibility for the wrongful prosecution. Money, Gregory added. We can't give you back the years, but Sterling will provide substantial compensation, enough to secure your future, to help Sarah with college, to rebuild. I don't want money, Kane interrupted harshly, then quieter. I want my daughter back. The pain in those words was so raw that everyone in the room felt it physically. Amara thought about her own father, absent but by choice. Kane's absence had been forced, and worse, his daughter thought it was deserved. Then help us show her who you really are, Amara said. Not by destroying the world in revenge, but by being the person she used to know. The father who taught her mathematics, who encouraged her curiosity, who believed in using knowledge to help people. That person isn't gone, Dr. Kane. He's just been hurt. But he can choose right now what kind of man Sarah will see when she finally learns the truth. Kane was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant. When Sarah was 10, she asked me why I worked at a community college instead of a big tech company where I could make more money. I told her some things were more important than money, that helping one student discover their potential was worth more than any salary. She said she wanted to be like me when she grew up. His voice cracked. And then she found out her father was a thief, or so she thought. How do I come back from that? How do I look her in the eyes and explain that I'm not who she thought I was, but also not who she spent 5 years believing I was? The same way I look at my mother every day, Amara said, her own voice thick with emotion. My mom works 3 jobs to keep us fed. She cleans offices for people who treat her like furniture. She's exhausted every single night. And sometimes I feel so guilty that she has to sacrifice so much for me. But she tells me that watching me learn, watching me grow, watching me become who I'm meant to be, that makes every sacrifice worth it. Tears were rolling down Amara's face now, weeks of held-back emotion finally breaking through. Your daughter doesn't need you to be perfect, Dr. Kane. She needs you to be honest. She needs to know that you fought for your innocence as long as you could, that you survived something that would have broken most people, and that even after everything the system did to you, you're still the man who believes in helping people rather than hurting them. Kane's face was wet with tears too. What if she can't forgive me? What if the damage is too deep? Then you keep trying, Marcus said quietly, his own voice unsteady. You keep showing up. Keep being honest. Keep being the father she needs. That's what real strength is. Not revenge, not destruction, but the courage to be vulnerable enough to rebuild what was broken. He paused, then added, And Dr. Kane, I will spend the rest of my life making sure the system that failed you changes. Not just Sterling National Bank, but the entire industry. Real accountability, real oversight, real consequences for people like Patricia who abuse their power. It won't fix what happened to you, but maybe it can prevent it from happening to someone else. The clock showed 45 minutes until market opening. 45 minutes until Kane's attack would either trigger or be stopped. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. If I stop this, Kane said finally, I need more than promises. I need action. Real, visible, immediate action. Name it, Marcus said without hesitation. Kane's expression hardened with purpose. Sterling National Bank establishes a foundation for wrongfully convicted individuals. Not just compensation, but support for rebuilding their lives, job training, legal assistance, mental health services, family reunification resources, funded with $100 million initially, sustained with ongoing contributions. Done, Marcus agreed immediately. You personally testify before Congress about corporate corruption and the need for stronger oversight, Kane continued. No holding back, no protecting the industry. Complete transparency about how this happened and how to prevent it. Done. And Amara Martinez, Kane looked directly at her, his expression softening, gets a full scholarship to any university she chooses, with Sterling National Bank funding her education through whatever level she wants to pursue. Plus an internship program at Sterling for students like her, talented kids from underprivileged backgrounds who deserve opportunities they've been denied. Done, Marcus said, then turned to Amara. Though I suspect you could have negotiated better terms for yourself. Amara shook her head, tears still flowing. I don't want special treatment. I want the door opened for everyone like me. That's what matters. Kane studied her for a long moment, seeing perhaps a reflection of who he used to be before bitterness consumed him. You remind me of Sarah. When she was younger before, he couldn't finish the sentence. She's still that person, Jennifer said gently. And she's going to need her father. A real father, not a ghost consumed by revenge. Kane closed his eyes, and when he opened them, something fundamental had changed. The rage was still there, that wouldn't disappear overnight, but it had been joined by something else. Hope, perhaps, or the possibility of redemption. The attack is already in motion, he said. I built it to be autonomous, to trigger automatically. To stop it, I'll need direct access to Sterling's core systems. You'll have it, Marcus said. And I want immunity from prosecution for the attempted attack, Kane added. Marcus looked at Jennifer and Gregory, then back at Kane. I can't promise that officially, but I can promise that Sterling will not cooperate with any prosecution, will actively work to negotiate immunity, and will provide the best legal defense if it comes to that. Kane nodded slowly. Then give me access. We have 37 minutes. As Jennifer and Gregory rushed to set up the secure connection, Marcus and Amara sat in the aftermath of the most emotionally intense negotiation either had experienced. Thank you, Marcus said to Amara, for being wiser than I could ever be. I'm not wiser, Amara replied, wiping her eyes. I'm just someone who understands what it's like to be dismissed. And I know that anger is easier than hope, but hope is what actually changes things. Kane's face reappeared on the screen, this time showing multiple windows of code as he worked frantically to dismantle the attack he had spent months designing. His fingers flew across the keyboard with the same grace Amara had demonstrated hours earlier. Two brilliant minds, both forged by injustice, now working to prevent catastrophe rather than cause it. With 12 minutes remaining, Kane paused. There's one more thing you should know. I wasn't working alone. There are others. People who were wronged by financial institutions, who lost everything in crashes caused by executive greed, who have been crushed by a system that protects the powerful. They're watching what happens here. If Sterling backs out of any promise made tonight, if this is just about avoiding immediate crisis, they'll finish what I started. Let them watch, Marcus said firmly. Let them see that real change is possible, that accountability can actually happen, that the system can acknowledge its failures and work to fix them. Let them see, and let them hold us accountable. Kane's expression shifted to something approaching respect. He returned to his work, his fingers dancing across keys, unraveling threads of code that could have crashed the entire economy. With 3 minutes remaining, he stopped. It's done. The attack is neutralized. Your systems are secure. The relief in the room was palpable, but it was tempered by understanding that this was just the beginning, not the end. Dr. Kane, Amara said as the clock ticked past 9 a.m. and the markets opened without incident. Will you let us help you contact Sarah? To tell her the truth? Kane's face crumpled with emotion he'd been holding back. I don't know if I can face her. What if she still hates me? Then she hates you while knowing the truth instead of hating you while believing a lie, Amara said gently. That's still better. That's still progress, and maybe eventually it leads to healing. As emergency meetings began throughout Sterling National Bank, as federal prosecutors started processing Patricia's confession, as the media began reporting the extraordinary story of wrongful conviction and corporate redemption, Sebastian Kane sat alone in his sparse apartment, staring at a photograph of his daughter, and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 5 years: hope.